Hello, hello. My name is Dr. Brian Curtis, and it is my distinct honor and pleasure to share with you my top stories of 2025 in dinosaur paleontology. So, 2025, we just had a great year of paleo discoveries. A lot of these you're going to know, but some of them, they slipped your radar. They didn't make your front page of your feed, but they're worth talking about. So I'm going to take them chronologically in order. Rather than go from big to small, I'm just going to take them month by month. And so let's go ahead and jump right in. The very first one we have is in March with Garcia and the team down in South America working on face biting. What are we talking about here? This is a Hadrosaur. Now, they have a bounty of riches. They have so many cool Hadrosaur type meat-eating dinosaurs that the top one's just Hadrosaur indeterminate. They haven't named it. They don't know exactly what species. Amazing. But the thing that caught my eye was, in part, we're working on some tooth marks in the Jurassic. And so I'm also working on face biting in the Cretaceous. So this paper was just perfect. And they make these wonderful close-ups. You see here B, and they're showing you the puncture marks and the scratch marks here. And over here, you've got a chunk of bone that's taken out that they're arguing is not taphonomic. It's not a result of preservation or preparation. It's actually part of the dinosaur's face when it was alive. And they show similarly here. You can look at the E right here. Apologies if I look down. I'm watching the screen like you all. And then you can see this tooth bite that runs down the side. This isn't a worm trail, a burrowing creature didn't get in on it. This is a rip across the face. And I love how they did this. They highlight just part of the skull, and then they show that there's this long scratch mark as well. You've got all of these damages on the face. And they show it's not just one. There are damages across a number of skulls. They do a great job of showing you what bite marks look like on other specimens that were found in similar time frame in the similar locality. So you can see things were gnawed on, holes were bitten through. They're building the case that these are truly tooth marks scratched across the face of these guys. And only the guys, it seems like. That's one hypothesis that you can come with, because then when they plot the frequency in this cool pie chart, 43% of these specimens have craniofacial lesions, so bite marks. And they've got this great illustration of it biting and ripping. Now, we've watched, if you had a puppy, you know puppies bite your hand and they gnaw on each other. Crocodiles will fight and gnaw. So it's not unheard of that animals will bite on faces. Sometimes it's for play, sometimes it's for position, for food, for mating purposes. A lot of reasons animals bite. I guess they don't use their words, or when words fail. So the thought process is potentially you have a male versus female breakdown with roughly 50%, but you can't know, A, is that true? I mean, the breakdown's true from what we have, but does that hold across the population? B, is that percentage of face biting? Is that the males biting males, males biting females, females biting females, females biting males? We don't know. But it is interesting because we see this a similar proportion in the Cretaceous on face biting and tyrannosaurs. So it does make one wonder. But I really enjoyed this paper. I thought it was a fun read. And because of work I'm doing, it was very timely in my world. So good job, guys. Now, in March, one of the reasons you may not have caught that paper was Duonychus was named. Kobayashi and crew. I was in Japan when this broke, and so I wasn't even aware this was happening. And then when I checked the internet, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So in Mongolia, they have this great map to show you where you're looking. There's China, and there's the Mongolia line, and all of these localities where these specimens come from. They found this. And this is truly, to me, one of the most spectacular finds ever. As a lad that enjoys a nice claw, I'm always wondering how much keratinous sheath was present on the claw. Well, here we can look, because that's keratinous sheath preserved. And I'm going to bounce around on these slides for a bit. It wasn't just the claws that was preserved. It was the entire hands, both hands, left and right hands, most of the right arm and almost all the left arm. Some nice dorsal vertebrae, the pelvis, caudals. It's a nice, good skeleton. And they're showing you it has 2 fingers. Here's the third metacarpal, just like you see on Tyrannosaurs. Many Tyrannosaurs have this third metacarpal, but you don't see any of the phalanges, any of the fingers. It's back in here. You wouldn't have seen but 2 fingers on this creature in life. They did an interesting study to show the range of motion. So they used the physical bones themselves to determine that it could only move in about 42-degree arc, and the fingers had that range of motion you see here. And they suggest that it could have curled up and grabbed something about this thick, which is kind of cool. Now, this is the one that blew me away because you could see the bony core when they looked and the sheath. So it's about, 25-30% more? And we have Spicomellus, which is a really tiny dinosaur I got to see recently in Italy. And it has keratinous sheath preserve. And we have some keratinous sheaths in Chinese specimens. And we're seeing this range as 25-30%. So if that holds, we might just blanketly apply it. That'd be dangerous, but for artistry, at least you could argue why you're making your sheath so long. And I love this picture. I'm going to see a lot about it. I can't believe how fortunate they were. They found it all in situ in articulation. Inarticulation is magic for paleontologists because we absolutely know that this bone plugged into that bone. And this is the left hand. Zooming in close, you can just see the exquisite level of preservation. This is Mongolia. It's on my bucket list to go visit. So if y'all want a sauropod person to show up, call me. They make the interesting argument that through time, fingers get less and less. And you can see down here, when you look at their examples in Tyrannosaurs, you go from 3 fingers, like in Guanlong, down to 2. You've got in the Alvarezsaurs, you go from 3 fingers, like Deinonychus, down to 1. And Therizinosaurs, now they're making the same argument. Falcarius down here in Utah, and the Nanotyrannus in Arizona, New Mexico. Or New Mexico. We say it lived in Arizona, but anyway, it's a long story. Inside joke. But you have on the Therizinosaurs, now you have them down to 2 fingers with Duonychus. And with the Oviraptorosaurs, Oxoco seems to have 2 fingers. And clearly, you've got birds, which go down to 1 finger. Super cool paper, really exciting. I grabbed some of these images from the supplementary section of the paper. Always, always, always check out the supplementary section because they often have cool papers or cool figures you didn't know about. I just can't get over how complete and spectacular and uncrushed this hand is. Yep, more pictures. Just look at this. Thing of beauty. But many of you probably already stared at it in March. Hopefully you don't mind a reminder here in December when I'm shooting this. All right. Moving on, in April, Paulina Carbajal and team did something else that I really enjoyed. They looked at specimens hanging out down here in Argentina, and absolutely cool to see this. And why, again, I mentioned we're working on a couple different projects with teeth on bone, and here is a sauropod bone, and it shows different bite marks on it. But what is important is it shows 3 different morphologies of bite marks. And this is a cool paper because it'll really help the world when you think about large bones with tooth marks on it. You usually just see one, like just one scrape mark, and they did this nice overview. But they noticed 3 different types of scrape marks, suggesting 3 different types of animals gnawed on this particular bone. How cool is that? Very neat. As an aside, it'd be neat to go see some Komodo dragon, like cannibalism. What the Komodo teeth look like if it's scratching bone on the other dragons or on deer. Or and I know there's work on what various savanna creatures and lions and cheetahs' teeth look like raking across bone. But I thought this was cool because they give a roadmap. They show that here's a scratch, and then you've got scratches in other places, and the scratches start to take on different views. You can see them gnawing on this rib, biting in a certain direction, their bites, and the mapping that they did was fantastic. So this paper really helped our team out on what we're working on. Now, May comes along, and Bond made my day because the future is here. Machine learning is being tested. Pectinodon, yeah, it's a tooth, and it bothers me. I don't like working with dinosaurs named from teeth. But you find all these small predatory, mostly teeth, in the late Cretaceous of North America. And what's challenging is, well, which ones are pectinodon versus troodon versus various dromaeosaurids like Archaeoraptor? How do you know what teeth go to what? And it takes a lot of effort. So these folks, they decided to build a training data set and use machine learning. And they go through their setup of how they built the database and how they take these tiny teeth and make it so the machine can read it and understand it and learn about the image from using AI. And this is their results. They worked out the percentage of variations. So they did some basic, well, some rather complex statistical analyses, but when it was done, the principal components show you where the variation is, and that's cool. But this is the part that blew me away, is they took specimens that were known classifications, and their machine on their first pass through this achieved 71% accuracy. That's 7 out of 10. I'll bet you many graduate students won't get that high when they made their first pass through. So what this tells me is, as they refine their model, as more models are created, as model creating becomes easier and easier for everyone, what we're going to see is the incorporation of this machine learning type information where you have a large number of specimens and you want to know, well, what am I actually looking at? What genus am I looking at? And this is the wave of the future. This is I say an ethical use, because people are talking about AI and ethics of stealing data. I think this is a great use case of paleo and AI coming together. I love tech. I love seeing this kind of project. So 2 thumbs up, absolutely excited. Now, we've got gut. In May, we had an amazing paper come out that you might have missed. And you may have heard Duonychus earlier mentioned. This is one of my favorite kinds of abstracts. This is a graphical abstract. So if you don't read the paper, you can see that they're just wondering, did the diet start as carnivorous and end up as an insectivore across the clade? And if so, well, how could we test it? So they have this incredible find here, and it has gut contents. And it's amazing gut contents. Absolutely cool. And so they went ahead and dropped the scanning electron microscope and they checked out, well, what's floating around in the gut? And they noticed that they looked at other gut SEMs as well. And they started seeing that, that it's possible that the animal here had bone fragments in it. It's got some insects potentially, so maybe it was doing a little of both. They just show that this is a great way of looking at potential diet and what's going on, and ways that you could take animal guts when we get super lucky on preservation and compare them and add them into a cladogram. It's an amazing paper. I really enjoyed it, though I don't understand much about SEM, so always learning. June, staying on the gut, Poropat and team, they found this. You know it's a sauropod because big site, little people. And they found this area in here, huge amount of gut content spilling out. That's the sacrum. So here's some cervical vertebrae. So it's right in the right spot, right in the hind gut area. And they looked and showed, hey, we have matrix blocking some skin impression. And then if we go deeper, we can get into the stomach itself and look at its contents. And I liked the fact that they were very careful. Everything these folks down in Australia are doing, grade A science. I'm loving it. I need to get back to Australia. I was going to be there, but then this thing called COVID kicked us out of the country. They did also microscopy work, and they look and see, hey, look, we have actual plants that are undigested. Now, we've long suspected that sauropods chomped off leaves, swallowed them into their gut, and let the gut digest them. Well, this is definitive evidence of that. And not only that, but they go back and demonstrate how you could definitely look at the skull and the postcranial elements and look at the guts and look at the heights of the trees that they're eating. Really, really cool paper. Caught all the headlines for all the right reasons. Now, I'm throwing this one in as a shameless plug for myself and the Diplodocoids working group. There's, at the high side, 20 plus paleontologists working on Diplodocids or Diplodocoids of various sorts, and we work together to put together a huge volume that individual chapters have been coming out throughout 2025. And I didn't cheer for ourselves and celebrate every one of them, but I do this one because we are showing every single, in the literature, Diplodocoid, and from the split from macronarians, and then all the splits across. We published a bunch on Haplocanthosaurus. We've got a whole bunch of other papers coming out in this area. It's a wonderful project. It's a fantastic working group. Theropod researchers tend to fight with one another. Sauropod researchers tend to get along with one another right nicely and hang out together. So if you wonder what a Diplodocoid is, well, here's 4 different kinds of Diplodocoids. You can see long necks, long tails, amazing creatures, some of the coolest dinosaurs in the world: Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, Dicryosaurs, and this paper was led by van der Linden. It's this beautiful history of them. If you want to study Diplodocoids, you start with that paper, and that paper has, I think our references were as long as the paper itself. We try to get as much as we could to make it useful for many, many years to come. You also saw Spicomellus. We're going to go over this rather briefly. This was in the supplementary section. You may or may not got the opportunity to see this photo to show the cervical ring with these weird spikes coming off of it. Now, I want to emphasize something. These were not found articulated, and that's a key because you always see this great cast of Gastonia, and that's wild guesswork. In fact, most ankylosaurs and nodosaurs, the way the armor is put together is speculative. And it's because these animals die and that they break apart the plates. It's rare that you find them where they die, flip on their back, everything collapses in, and you can figure it out. There's a couple of those on display. One at the American Museum comes to mind that desperately needs studied. They knew how important it was when they prepared it out. So there is precious few actual specimens. Zool, Borealopelta, there's some great examples. But this is some wild, wild stuff. Assuming this all goes to one individual, likely does, and that this material is just mind-blowing. You never see a rib with spikes. It's unheard of in the vertebrate record. It's absolutely, unbelievably wild. And I just can't believe, I didn't believe it when this thing was named a few years ago. They bought the fossils from commercial collectors in Morocco, I believe, and they published on it because they said, look, we've never seen anything like this. And they were selling for quite a bit of money. It's not illegal for these fossils to be sold. And then they, as the high-end collectors seemingly got their belly full, the prices began to drop, and they found more of these. They're looking for them because they're valuable. Supply and demand comes in. There's more supply than demand. The price goes down, and then they find really cool specimens. When I see this, though, it's clearly ankylosaur. These long, broad caudal ribs, short spine, almost non-existent. No other kind of animal has these. You can see this again, classic morphology of the ankylosaurs. And here you have, this is best guess of where all these go, is wild because like this piece here, if this is truly goes to that, what the heck is going on? They're built in. I mean, the spikes are integrated in a way that is just unheard of. Now, why they think the tail looks like this, I'm not really sure. They have a spike that they're conjecturing goes at the tail, but I would argue that all of this is a solid guesstimate, but it is just that. We could find a specimen tomorrow and find that 75% of this armor is in the wrong spot, in the wrong proportions, but it's a striking, stellar, beautiful image. And I think it's this one. What? Are you kidding me? This is some kind of collar. You're looking at it head on as if you were staring into its eyes. And this is coming off here in this wild area right around the neck. Love this material. Now, the Ibiruku and team came up with Joaquinraptor. This should be in italics. I missed that. Apologies. Here we're going to go down Commodore Rivadavia. I love this place. I went down there and spent time, and absolutely wonderful people. If you've heard of Sarmientosaurus, well, there's Sarmiento, a little grape. And these folks are working down here at a lake, and they are finding all kinds of dinosaurs. And in this particular one, they found an associated skeleton of a Megaraptor. And what they're showing is how here is Joaquinraptor and there's Megaraptor. Notice this is much shallower versus a deeper or a more acute angle versus obtuse here. The morphology as they work through is different but from Megaraptor. So they knew they had something new. and they call it Joaquinraptor. Now in the supplementary, remember I talked about supplementary, they have this neat tooth to show you the denticles. Super cool. I had to count denticles for the first time a couple years ago on a paper I was part of, and now I actually don't blow past these. I stop and look at them, and so I'm sharing them with you. Here's the skeleton. This is the outline in blue is what they have. A huge amount of skull, including the great lower jaw, the dentaries, a beautiful part of the left arm, and a nice good amount of the left leg. Unfortunately, there's not much vertebrally present, a couple ribs, and my favorite, some caudal vertebrae, but these are way far back. You got a claw too. Who doesn't love a claw? Oh, the brain case, it's kind of important. Now, what I never heard in any of the press that accompanied this is the statement that was included. And we're going to get to why in a second that this was included. Such as interspecific combat or competition for food, or even just a coincidental association, e.g., the humerus was moved to a position between the Joaquinraptor gentries by water currents. What am I talking about? And that's this. This is a humerus of a crocodilian of some sort, and this is where it was before they removed it when they prepared it. It was in between the jaws. So did it die choking on a crocodilian? They have this saying that this just could have been a croc and a dinosaur fighting for food, or the dinosaur died and the croc died and this rolled into its lower jaws. But here you have it here. This is the humerus. They prepped it out, but this is it right here. And as you see, here's the lower jaws. That's the left and the right side. Really neat to see this. The thought is, did it puncture in there? And was it biting it and it got stuck? Or was this just a happenstance occurrence? They did not come out and emphatically state, because they are a very careful scientific team. But because I've worked at a lot of bone beds where you'll find bones pushed up against another and you never think about it choking on it. But in this case, if this scratch is actually a tooth scratch, well, that lends it a little more credence to that might have happened. It choked on a chicken bone or a croc bone in this case. I'm sure this isn't the last we'll hear about this, but super cool paper, really neat. They have something else I'll point out. When you cross the equator, the maps are flipped upside down for our sensibilities. I know when I went to Zimbabwe and looked at this world map drawn on a wall, I was really confused at first, because we have such, or at least I have such a westernized view, born and raised in Arizona, watching world maps, always having North America on the left, Asia on the right. But when you go flip to the other side, it can change your perspective. So cool to see this, very neat. We live on a sphere, we live on an orbit, or a round rock. Now, just in time for Halloween, we had the Mummies paper drop. This is the classic Lull and Write. If you haven't ever gotten a chance to look through it or even read it, those folks knew a lot. They knew what they were talking about. And Lull and Write point out that there's different kinds of skin scales on one of the mummies that they were looking at, the famous mummy in American Museum. They thought back then that these animals were highly aquatic and it had them swimming. But they also drew it with this tall, fleshy midline. And Sereno's crew started studying these mummies, and they noticed that in this small radius circle, I want to say it's 6 miles across, and this mostly on the Zerbst Ranch, you keep finding mummies of different animals. The one that's at the bottom of the ocean, called the Senckenberg mummy, the mummy that's at the American Museum of Natural History, plus the mummy that these guys found. And they did a lot of cool studies. I'm going to jump all over. It's not going to be the normal flow of their paper, because what they did was they looked very carefully at dorsal spines on extant taxa. So this is Trioceros. You've got the 3 horns there coming out, the chameleon, and you've got this cool, every one of these dorsal neural spines has a little spike on top. The Tuatara, the tail has the same match. I got to hold a Tuatara a few years ago. That was a bucket list item. They look at how the dorsal spines are attached integument-wise. They have beautiful, beautiful work where they fade skeletons in on specimens to show how thick this is and fleshy these can be. And yes, lizards are not dinosaurs. They're vertebrates, but they split long, long ago. But nature has a tendency of doing the same things over and over again. And that's what they're showing here. They're also showing how these spines on these living animals interlock. So this spine and this spine and this spine and this spine, when you look at it from above, they all interlock, interdigitate with one another. All right, now we're going to get to some cool paleo stuff. This is a specimen that was known for many years ago, and it has this beautiful horn, the spine, not horn core, this dorsal spine, and it's sitting right at the middle of the pelvis, and it has no spines forward. And this mummy they found has beautiful spines. You can see here, look, they interlock, just like what we saw on living creatures. This has a V, if you will, laying down on its side, a trough that this notches into. So these interdigitate. And each of these neural spines has one spine. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. Super cool work to show that, yeah, this alone is neat, but when you then start comparing it with extant taxa, you start seeing, wow, that's really cool. Ossified tendons, they show how the tendons are interacting. This mummy is great. It's a juvenile mummy. It's first of its kind. They've got more evidence of the skin with those big, tall, fleshy areas on top of the bone themselves. Wonderfully illustrated paper, especially in the supplementary section. Here is the skull. This is the neck. The skull is thrown back in that opistotonic death pose, which we see happens when you just add water and you can retract the neck, at least with chickens and an emu. I suspect it was the same with dinosaurs. Die, and fairly recently after death, like hours, get covered in water, neck retracts. There's my favorite part, the tail. This is another mummy. Their paper goes on to say why mummies, when you're drawing modern hadrosaurs, you need to stop right here at the pelvis. You should not have any of these, in their opinion, because there's no evidence for that. Despite a number of mummies that have been found, none have been found with spikes forward of the hips. So this is a beautiful skeleton, and they draw it like this. And they said no. And here you have all these going forward of the hips, and they're drawing them forward of the hips. They do not like forward of the hips because there's no evidence for it. And here again, way forward all the way to the back of the skull. And they would argue no. As an aside, I found this interesting. There were a number of typos in this paper. Campione didn't publish in 1915. It should be 2015. So here is a paper in one of the top rated journals in the world, and it's got typos. So there's always room for improvement, even at the gold standard of journal publication. Another one where they're arguing that you shouldn't illustrate them like this going forward, which is kind of interesting. Oh, one other aside in the paper. Well, they talk about this fleshy crest, which is present, and we know it's present on one specimen. And though they restore theirs with the fleshy crest, they argue in the paper that there was too much skin back here and it likely wouldn't have it. Thought that was an interesting twist. Another twist is how similar a hadrosaur's foot is to tapirs. And this part of their paper also shines because it talks about the feet of the hadrosaurs and how their forelimbs and hind limbs are the only vertebrate that they know of that have two different kinds of toe strikes and hand finger strikes when it walks. If you think about all animals that walk on four legs, their fore and hind foot, they're hitting the same way. But these are digitigrade and eululigrade. I'm not sure if I said that right, but it's a cool looking word in the paper. And they look at these hadrosaur prints and they say, wait, this looks like a tapir. Now, they define what a hoof is, and they do a great job at it. This is a classic. This was how it was drawn on the American Museum mummy right here. And you see this beautifully tight-knit mitten. I just went and looked at it a few weeks ago. And it was argued that it was used to swim. Well, that's not the case at all. But what an absolutely cool hand of it. It gets tightly wrapped. You see these bigger scalations up here. Amazing. And they look at the feet and they lay the foot bones down into a trough. They note that the actual nail that's preserved is twice as wide as the underlying bone. I thought that was really cool. They did track work to show that these hooves would fit nicely in these kinds of tracks, and these tracks look like tapirs. Great paper, a lot of fun. Definitely recommend it. Here's what I was getting at. They show in their paper this little helmet, but unfortunately in the paper itself, they argue this wouldn't have been present on the species they were working on. Now, the other big one that hit this year, as if mummies weren't enough in October for Halloween, you had Nanotyrannus explode onto the scene. I'm going to start with a picture from long ago. This is from Pete Larson. Clayton Phipps and his crew did an incredible job of finding it. They dug it out. They did some preparation. They saw they had the dueling dinosaurs, which was Nanotyrannus, which they called from the early days, and a Triceratops. And this is really cool to see from above. Absolutely neat. Now, this is a figure from the paper to show that here, if you look back, there's that head. They've rotated it slightly, but they've prepared off more of the rocks. The tail, which was found, isn't in that other picture, and they show that it's got a beautiful tail, articulated for the most part. Super cool. I love this animal. It's great. It's world famous. Ask Canva. Yeah, I forgot to take that out. I use Canva to clean up all of my figures and cut them out and paste them, so that's kind of embarrassing there. I should probably fix it before I use this slide again. I dubbed this Warhammer because their part code is 40,000. The North Carolina Science Museum 40000 can be read as NCSM 40,000. If you are a war gamer, 40,000 is 40K, and it's Warhammer 40K. There's my logic. And I know Napoli and his friends are big gamers. Maybe they did that on purpose. It was recently given a new nickname. It had originally been called, or it had a nickname of Bloody Mary, and now it's being called Manteo. But it'll always be Warhammer in my heart as long as that specimen number stays the same. Now, this paper also appeared in a fantastic upper end journal, and it too has a typo. It at one point has the specimen as 40,000 and 3 ends on Nanotyrannus, which just goes to show you, even the most carefully vetted papers will have errors and mistakes in them. Super trivial and minor. I say that because if you are an aspiring student or if you are publishing papers and you catch an error after it comes out, hey, if it happened to the Sereno crew and James Napoli and crew, it can happen to you. It's all right. You're in good company. Love the images, the illustrations they put on there. They have gorgeous. I have touched all of these. Funny aside, I'm a sauropod lad. I chase tail all over the world touching sauropod tail bones. 30 countries, 6 continents, every state. I'm constantly traveling. And on my travels over the decades, I have seen a tremendous amount of public and private Nanotyrannus material. And it was never a question that Nanotyrannus was a legit specimen to me. It was more a question of when will this kind of work come out, and when will these private specimens or these not published public specimens, like this is at KU, that's Kansas, the University of Kansas has this specimen, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Now, Jane has been floating around, and Jane had been said to be the quintessential teenage T-Rex. However, in this paper, Jane was renamed to Nanotyrannus lethaeus, which is super exciting because they decided to make 2 Nanotyrannus species. Surprised me. I did not see that coming, but that's what they did. I'm going to go back to the Larson because in 2014, there was a SVP had this great, or 2013, this poster Larson presented, and he laid out a T-Rex arm next to a Nanotyrannus arm. And what he was pointing out was how the Nanotyrannus's arm in absolute lengths was already longer than a big T-Rex arm. So how could you take this arm and turn it into that arm? You'd have to literally shrink the arm to get it to be the size of a Tyrannosaur arm. Pretty powerful stuff. He made a bunch of arguments that were mostly ignored in the literature. And this is a problem because in part he's commercial, in part he's not an accredited, credentialed, degreed academic. But Pete has seen a lot of stuff in his days. He's collected probably more T-Rexes than anyone since Barnum Brown. And he's observant. He sees stuff. So in the paper, they show, again, the Tyrannosaurus rex in absolute terms. The Nanotyrannus arm is longer, the hand is longer than a T-Rex, which is what Larson was pointing out. They also show these cool growth curves to show that Nanotyrannus is an adult and it's petering out at growth versus a similar age T-Rex. Longrich and Saida did this the year before, and they showed a similar curve. It's always good when two research organizations that do not talk to one another, they don't work with each other, they don't interact with each other, they publish similar charts. And super cool, especially because the Napoli team, Zano and Napoli, they used a higher order, a better methodology to produce more exacting results. But you can see over here, the curves are the same, the premise is the same, so that's neat to see. Remember, Longrich and Saida controversially came out and said Nanotyrannus is real in 2024. All kinds of controversy. I'm not here to get into controversy. I'm here to show that their growth curves, their years of growth, their weights, they all came out pretty similar. The modern interpretation on the newspaper is coming out a little over 800 kilograms, and they had it coming in right around 700, 800 to 1,000 kilograms. So pretty cool to see. The numbers match up quite nicely and very confident. This was another one from the Larson paper way back when to show you the giant differences in the dentaries of Nanotyrannus lithaeus versus T-Rex. And you can see that they are wildly different looking animals. This doesn't grow into that. You've got to have massive changes. But that's what had been argued since the probably 99, somewhere in there, when a paper came out saying that all of these are just teenage T-Rexes, and that was the academic norm. There's always been a group that just shrugged their shoulders and said no, but it's super nice to see that this argument is. I'm going to leave the last image here with Dr. Larry Whitmer. We were able to CT scan the nano skull recently. I was part of that with Larry and with James. We had a great time. Thank you guys. Still smiling about that. And James Napoli's an up and comer, one of the most incredibly careful, patient, just 2 thumbs up. Watch Napoli's career arc. It's going to be great. And Larry is an all-time. He's a goat. Guy's amazing. So I got to hang out with him, and we CT scanned. But this is an older CT scan of Larry's. Larry has had the distinct pleasure of CTing the skull multiple times, every time getting a little bit more information on it. Super cool specimen. So Nanotyrannus is a valid taxon. I don't see how anyone can overturn it being a valid genus. I suppose they could go and try to give it a different name, but that's a 2026 problem. Now, you remember I love technology, and here we are in November of 2026 with Pickles comes out with something on drones. What is this? These are bone fragments. Yep. In Canada, the bones are often just seen on the ground weathering out. And the importance of collecting them is in 3 years or so, this will all be gone. This will just be absolutely lost to time. And you have these beautiful orangey lichen. You've got bone gets covered in lichen. And it's thought that the lichen might be pulling out some kind of nutrients, phosphoratic, something, some chemistry in there is preferentially preferred to just ground, because you see they're on every one of these bone chunks. So their team had this really great idea. Can we spot lichen using a reflectance technology? And sure enough, up in here, the lichen reflects more, and so they can pick it up in their work. And so they look and show here sandstone and ironstone, the typical stuff that the dinosaurs in the provincial park are covered in, or found in, I should say. And they show, look, bone. Bone is all very predictable, but this is lichen. So the thought was, we can spot lichen. And so they took a drone and they took a picture of their quarry from up in the air, and this is what it looks like in pixels. It doesn't look like much, but you can see there's that orange from the quarry. And then the computer said, this is bone. And sure enough, they were able to find bone using a drone because of the lichen on the bone. Wow. Talk about opening up the ability to do surveys. And because Mother Nature every year, Mother Nature is freezing and thawing and putting rain it freezes and breaks bone apart. As you saw, that bone was exploded. The thought is you could fly a drone every year or after every big storm and look for it. Now, lichen doesn't grow that fast, so it's newly covered. It's not going to find it. But you might have a shot at finding all of this older bone that's already blown up and exploded. And if you find that bone, well, you can dig into the ground and hopefully there's more of there in the ground. And I'm just so excited about the technologies that were used in 2025 with machine learning and with drone tech for the future of dinosaur paleontology, finding in the museum collections, finding in the field. Tess Gallagher and crew use technology, more scanning electron microscopes. It's almost like you need it to get into the 2025 top series. And they show off melanosomes. Now, I do not understand this. First to raise my hand and say, yeah, I followed it. Logically, it made sense, but could I teach it back to you? No, which meant I'm very surface at this point. But what I can tell you is their paper is arguing that in Gallium opus, it's not a Diplodocus. Sorry, Tess, this is emphatically not Diplodocus. Not that it matters for your paper. Your paper is talking about the color of sauropods, and the sauropods have two kinds of melanosomes present. So at least in Gallium opus, we know there's two different shades of color on the scales. What those colors were, we don't know, but we do know that they were present. So the elephant-style monochromatic brown, gray that you see in sauropods, green, that's likely not the case. At least in one individual, we know that wasn't the case. We know that there are two different kinds of melanosomes present. And as a result, you get two different colors present, which is really cool. Can't wait to see this work as it moves forward. And they look at other areas, other sauropods in particular. I know of some skin swaths that should be coming out hopefully next year, definitely 2027. I can't say any more except stay tuned. I'll just stop. I'll get myself in trouble. Now, we hit December, but I'm going back to November because of this bonus animal. Now, this was a cool pterosaur. Everybody talked about it. This was a specimen that was named. It was from Brazil, from the Romualdo Formation, where you find incredible preservation. They cracked this rock open, which, by the way, is now in two museums. So if you want to see both sides, you got to take a road trip from one to the other. And you're like, well, what am I looking at here? Well, it was interpreted as a regurgitite. And the blue here is interpreted as being part of the Bakiruba, was the name they gave this new pterosaur. And they're saying that this, possibly a Spinosaur, but some predator ate this animal, and it had eaten it somewhere else than where it was found, because there's no pterosaurs, no tenacantid pterosaurs found where this particular regurgitite, which is what happens when a regurgitated mass turns into a rock. It's a cute name. There's none known from that area, so it's thought that it was chomped and then brought somewhere else, and then it ate some fish afterwards, and then vomited those fish up with this, and it solidified the mass, and we find it inside. Various levels of luck had to happen, but given enough time, and we've got millions and millions of years, crazy things like this happen. And that was all the rage at the end of November. Thanksgiving was full of comments around the Thanksgiving table about regurgitite. That was cute. But in December, pterosaur researchers, Dave Unwin and crew, they came out and said, not a pterosaur, but actually a fish. And the original group argued that since these were all oriented the same way, that was evidence that it was eaten and then vomited out. But Unwin and crew, they look through it, they use the same pictures, and they draw not a pterosaur, though they do acknowledge these are fish, but they draw the branchioles, they draw the gills, the gill cover underneath. If you ever fish and pull the gill cover up, you find all of these real thin bones in here. And this has happened before in this exact scenario of something was interpreted as a pterosaur and it turned out to be this. And I was hoping when I saw the paper, I'm like, oh no, I've seen this play out before. And it may be the case. So that is a preprint on a preprint server. It's going to make for a incendiary 2026, because I'm sure the team that found this thought about that paper and will have reasons why it's not. So stay tuned on this. But right now, I would call this a new pterosaur with an asterisk. They're arguing that what you're looking at here is this area of either Cratoamia or Calamoplurus. You're looking at underneath here are the gill branches, and they are preserved. They make no sense to me. If you ever want to ruin your day, that's not fair. If you want to stretch your brain, if you're a dinosaur paleontologist, go look at a fish skeleton and then weep openly. Thankfully, as vertebrates have evolved, their cranial structures have gotten more and more consolidated. So when you get to a human skull, it's practically simple in comparison to a dinosaur skull, which is super easy compared to fish skulls, which make me weep openly when I have to play with them, which is extremely rare. So I'm going to close on this controversy and say adios 2025, hello or hola 2026. I'm super excited to see what's going to happen. In fact, I'm going to try and make a predictions video before the year is done, and then I can review that at the end of 2025 to see how many things did I get right and how many things did I get wrong. One of the predictions I had made for 2026 online just happened to come true. This is December 20th when I'm making this, on a histology paper that just came out and called some things into question, as well as some frustrations I've had with lack of extant taxon variation. 3 days ago or so, a paper dropped with that very topic. So stop publishing 2025 because you're taking some of my 2026 thunder, and I didn't know these papers were coming. I hope you enjoyed the speed run of 2025's best of papers from Dr. Brian Curtis. That's me, Dr. BC. I get a kick out of this. I really enjoy paleontology a lot. Follow our channel, the Fossil Crates, across all of the social medias, on YouTube, everywhere else. And you can catch my almost daily posts on various museum experiences. So you got any questions, comments, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Drop your comments in the like box or drop the comments on the video. I actually respond to all the comments. It is more than likely that I have said things that are factually erroneous on some of these earlier reviews, and if so, my apologies. Feel free to point them out, and I can't fix the video, but I can certainly put them in the box to say where I was wrong. I try to be accurate, but I'm a sauropod tail specialist. Got my popcorn out like the rest of you. I know we've got some new dinosaurs that'll be coming out in 2026 that we're naming. Cannot wait to share those, so stay tuned. So good luck and good hunting. I'm Dr. Brian Curtis with Fossil Crates saying thank you kindly. Adios.